Welcome to Therapy, Coaching, and Dreams. My name is D. Kelly. This is Jim Shalley.
Hello, D. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be with you and to spend a little time, a coach and a therapist, exploring some of the things that contribute to human personality and life and wellness and health. And hopefully, some of the things we talk will be of interest to our audience. I have a series of questions for you today, so I hope you're ready to just respond, much like an interview, I think. But
Oh,
you're
well,
welcome.
geez. So this is going to be exciting. I should be interviewing you. Your
Well, you
book
can turn the
came so well.
tables. You can turn the tables on me anytime you want to.
Okay. I look forward to reading your book
Oh,
so that I
thank
can
you.
ask you some questions about it because I'm sure I won't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I intended to write it so it would go over everybody's head.
Well, it's certainly going to go over my head. So that's good. Anyway, I look forward to reading it.
Thanks. For those who might be interested, the title of the book is Dream Work. It's not that complicated. So if it goes over everybody's head, it completely defeats the purpose of the book. But
It is that complicated, evidently. So,
we've spent numerous in numerous conversations. We have talked about the ego, which is a psychological term that probably has different meanings to different people, different authors. So when we talk about the ego, I think it might be nice to, at least at some point in time, that time being now, try and give some explanation as to what we think the ego is. We've referenced it a little bit in previous times as to what we mean, but let's come back to that for just a moment. And let me just ask you, when you talk about the ego, what are you talking about?
that's a great question because you're right. It has a varied definitions depending on who you're reading and who you're who you're talking with. To use Freud, superego, ego, and id, all that stuff is involved in that. The ego basically is what drives us in life. Functional, dysfunctional, happy, unhappy, doesn't matter. It's what drives us. And so, how's it formed? The characteristics it has. As simply as we can, trying to keep it as simple as basically it drives the thing that drives the person to be successful, to do what they do. And in my mind, that's kind of the simple version of what the ego is.
That's great. Thanks. Tied into that, and I can't remember if it's probably true of several writers, but if Sanford was influential for me in this. But contained within the ego is the sense of how I perceive myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the extension of that, my persona, is how I want others to perceive me.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's really complicated in that sense because those
yeah,
intertwine a lot. So
yeah, they are not always aligned. How I want to be
absolutely,
perceived and how I perceive myself,
absolutely.
which is why people will often come and confess that they feel like they are either have a hidden life or they're not who people think they are, and that incongruence is problematic for them. So I often think of the ego as the way I perceive myself, and then to think about how that differs from how I want others to see me.
Mm.
I also have mentioned, and it seems appropriate to mention it again here, that when we talk about dreams, the ego typically appears as yourself in the dream, which raises an important issue that, as some have indicated, that your self in the dream may often be the least trustworthy character in the dream because
Yeah,
the other characters are trying to point out to the ego things that have been pushed into the shadow or things that the ego's not noticing.
yeah. The
No?
ego's very self-protective.
Yeah.
And that's why it's interesting to try to define it.
And it becomes incredibly protective of its own image when that image is threatened.
Mhm.
But let me just shift a little bit and talk about the external expressions of the ego. I don't know if you pick up on cues that immediately make you aware when you're working with somebody that their ego is very fragile. Are there things that you notice in the stories they tell or the issues they're facing that you realize a person has a fragile ego And probably it changes the way you interact because you have to care for the fragility of the ego sometimes in order to get to the issues behind that. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the probably the classic one is someone who comes in who needs to dominate the session, and they wanna control everything. And, yeah, that's their ego is so tied up in managing everything that to come at them directly, unless they're court ordered or they're gonna lose their job or something like that, you have to be very delicate, and tend to that fragile ego before they can even hear what you're saying.
Which is interesting because some people who would interact with a person like that might think that their arrogance betrays a very strong ego, but that's typically not true. Yeah. Well, let's contrast that a little bit to an inflated ego,
Kinda like mine.
which is really where we're going with this episode. This is an intervention.
Oh. Oh, man. Describe it for me. What do you mean, inflated ego?
I guess so. Very fair to turn the question around and ask me. I think when I am interacting with somebody that I perceive has an inflated ego, it is sometimes it's somebody who hasn't experienced enough failure.
Yes, because you're tempted. My imagery is you're tempted to take a needle and pop the inflation, and
Yes,
that's the temptation. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. I also sometimes think an inflated ego is an ego that ignores other possibilities. Like an inflated ego sometimes is evidenced of inflexible thinking,
Mhm.
sometimes. But yeah, that imagery of popping the bubble is a temptation in those moments,
Absolutely true. Yeah. Yeah.
which to me leads to that an inflated ego is probably more fragile than most people realize.
It is, and they would be the last to say they have an inflated ego,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Which is it's just fascinating how it's compensatory, usually for a pretty fragile self-esteem, to your point.
yeah. So let's move past a fragile or inflated ego. And how about a crushed ego?
Jeez, a crushed ego is just it's what I would say is reverse narcissism.
Oh, wow. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so in other words, my ego is crushed, so I'm really nobody. And so then I walk around saying, I used to do this, but now I don't do that. And you talk a lot about how your ego is crushed, and that's the reverse narcissism. That's all about you and your crushed ego. Now that's using the crushed ego. A truly crushed ego is someone who's so defeated in life that they may pull away from society. They may not talk to friends anymore. They may really, really just be in a bad place and then not even have the ego strength perhaps to use it as a martyr or a victim. They just simply just pull away from society and shut down and don't talk. I would say that's a crushed ego. Someone who life has just really treated them horribly and they said there's no point in continuing to engage with it. So whether that they become more of a hermit type, something like that, where they just pull away from society. And I think there's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah. And a, a crushed ego, as you described in that second half there, can often lead toward suicide ideation.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
that's very true.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
like people get to suicide ideation when it really is the only option that they can muster,
yeah.
and they're so defeated that that's the one last victory.
Mm,
It's like a weird statement of the ego, "At least I can do this."
so one thing I have control over?
Mhm, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
mean, obviously, it's you're in a really, really horrible place when you entertain those thoughts, but
And a truly crushed ego, I fear for individuals who are looking for some kind of quick fix because that usually doesn't come quickly.
yeah, and it will be just a temporary relief. Like,
Yeah.
somebody may come along and they'll use the energy of someone to kind of elevate for a period of time, but they will go right back if they don't internalize it.
Yeah. Because addressing a broken, crushed ego image of yourself takes a lot of work to see where does that come from, confronting the voices and the tapes that play inside.
And
And
it's the very thing we're talking about. It's
yeah,
like, how do you get to a crushed ego or an inflated ego? Both of them are basically wanting you to get in touch with who you really are
yeah,
as best you can, and get rid of all the pretense and the things that go into developing who we are, who we think we are. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm going to flip the tables from kind of the disrupted ego and talk for a few moments about where it would be nice if the ego could move in a particular direction toward health. So, to that end, when a healthy ego receives criticism, because criticism can really
Mhm.
yank an ego out of its fantasy world or whatever it might be, or it can add to a crushed ego, just pile on
Mhm.
and feel the weight even more. So when criticism comes, when you see somebody who has a very healthy, whole ego, not inflated, not deflated, just a healthy ego, how does a person like that respond to criticism?
The first statement, what you've talked a little bit about in previous episodes, is that you don't personalize it.
Hmm.
It's their thought. It's another person's thought. And so if you depersonalize it, then you're able to take a look at it and say, okay, is there any evidence for that? And then if you're pretty honest and pretty healthy, and if there is, you go, oh yeah, there is a little bit of that. Okay. So then you either own it and say, yeah, that's a part of my deal and it's okay. Or you simply go, that's interesting that they think that. And then you process it a little bit and you either let go of it or you entertain some of the truths of it and see what you want to do with that. But a healthy ego almost always, from my perspective, the initial statement is, okay, that's their thought. They're picking up something from me perhaps, or it's their stuff, and so is it legitimate?
Yeah. What can I learn from it and how do I let go of the rest of it?
Yeah, and that's a nice ideal place to live, but, as we all do, we suffer the curses of humanity in some ways. Takes us a while to get to that point of, "Oh, they just called me, yeah, am I that? I can be that, I suppose. No, I can't be that. Well, you might be that." Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reverse is also true. If I have a strong judgment about someone else, that may be more about me too. So a healthy ego would stop and go, "Wait a minute, I just really criticized them. Is there any part of me that does that too?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a healthy ego would be quick to realize that my reaction right then was a little out of proportion to the situation. And I need to think about why.
Mhm.
Yeah. Let me back it up a little bit more and say, what are some of the, we've talked about why people come to therapy, and I think we've covered that ground fairly well. But what might be a flag that comes up in somebody's life that says, I probably ought to talk to somebody about that? What kind of things would you say, pay attention to that? Why don't you go see somebody?
I think if you're somewhat of a reflective person and you can't make sense out of something, or you're limited in you're open to other views of a thought, and you're confident enough to be okay to share that thought. I think other voices add to that. So, I had this thought, what do you think of that? And that's scary, and most people would wanna go to a professional in some ways because there's no agenda other than how the therapist or the coach is experiencing that. Sometimes family members either are protective or they're too brutal if you ask them their view of things. So I think that's the value of, someone who really isn't invested other than giving you feedback based on how they're experiencing you without knowing you.
Yeah, that's great. I think when patterns repeat themselves over and over again and they're getting in the way of living, like
Yeah,
the
that's
same
great. Absolutely.
arguments that it come in my head that I think I deal with, but I keep
Absolutely,
repeating the same patterns.
and I also realize, wait a minute, I keep saying I keep minimizing it. It's like, "Oh, yeah, it's just another pattern." Really? Wait a minute. but it keeps coming back. So to your point, that's a great one. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
tired of dealing with this, or uh, someone in your life is basically pointing it out and saying they can't live with it anymore. That also might be a motivator to go in and say, okay, my spouse says that this trait is interfering. I don't see it. That can be at the urging of someone else. But for the individual, that will pick up on some kind of pattern and say, I'm just tired of doing this, and figuring out why.
Yeah. I really like the admonition you just gave. If others are saying something that you're not seeing, there's a defensiveness that then just starts screening that. But if you can listen to, oh, yeah, actually more than one person has told that to me, then maybe it's worth pursuing.
Oh,
Um,
this is my fifth spouse? Hmm,
yeah, yeah.
okay. What's the common denominator here? Oh, it's me.
Along that same line, I think if I keep attracting a certain type of individual into my life that doesn't seem healthy or
And they will always come in until you deal with something that's attracting them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's almost as if the universe keeps knocking on the door until you finally open and say,
Mhm.
okay, maybe I need to talk about this with somebody. I also think I hear this story often that for those who, let's say, went to college, that they realized that other people's family system wasn't like theirs. They didn't know that not everyone was raised the way they were raised. And I think that that is a wonderful time to maybe explore with someone, were all of the patterns in my family of origin helpful,
Yes.
beneficial? Maybe I should talk about
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And that's again back to the masculine and feminine. That's more of a feminine expression. The feminine energy is relationally driven, so it wants to figure those things out. So if you have a strong masculine side, you may need someone in your life to point that out. But as you develop the feminine side, you're more likely to ask those questions.
Yeah. That's great.
It's kind of like, back to your other point is if I find myself attracting people with strong narcissistic traits, usually I'm out of touch with my own narcissism.
And it's hard to hear it from somebody who isn't dispassionate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's why it's nice to talk to somebody who doesn't know the history, that will just hear it, receive it, and respond and
Yeah, and
help
that's
you
why
walk through it.
that's why with coaching or therapy or anything, the rapport building is so important from that perspective to be able to speak into someone's life, which I think is a sacred thing anyway, to
Yeah.
have the ability to speak into someone's life. Yeah.
Um, if the situation merits possibly medication you can't prescribe, well, when would a person know that
Well,
they ought to seek out
out of the trunk of my car, I could, but that's probably
wow.
that's
Okay.
inappropriate. That's not appropriate.
That will be the end of the podcast, I think. So next week it
Uh,
will just be me.
okay. That was an example of my ego getting carried away. Sorry about that. Anyway.
Um, uh, are there moments where you suggest that somebody talk to a psychiatrist or a primary care physician about the possibility of medication?
Yes.
How would I know that? How would I know to ask about that?
As a client,
Yeah.
typically, if there is a dynamic that's happening regularly and they can't seem to get past with all the maybe the insight or the awareness, they keep having this hurdle, then I'll recommend that maybe you need a medication to kind of stabilize so we can implement some of the things we're talking about. Because either their mood's so dysregulated or their anxiety is so dysregulated that they can't really do some of the things we talk about. So that's an example of where might recommend a consult with a psychiatrist or a primary care physician,
That's great. Uh,
and it's proven pretty appropriate in some cases where it so stabilized them and took the edge off of their anxiety or the depression that they were able to hear things and implement them better. So
yeah, there's quite a bit of research that shows the combination of medicine and talk therapy for certain issues is by far the most beneficial approach
Yeah.
for those particular areas of need.
I would say anything with a pretty intense mood disorder, whether it be
Thank you.
anxiety or depression.
Okay, thank you. Let's just talk, though, apart from that. What is one, I mean, I know it's not one size fits all, but one self care tactic that is helpful for many, many people? Anything that is just kind of a go to. I'll give you an example for me.
I love
Um,
that because self-care is not one of my strong points.
well,
Anyway.
I I think that one of the pillars of health is paying attention to sleep and sleep hygiene. So that's a self-care issue, is to, instead of just taking it for granted, pay attention to it and see if there are things you can do in regard to sleep hygiene that will better that area of life, because it has an effect on so many other things in life.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
for
good.
me an example.
Yep, I
Okay.
agree.
Tell me, you've referred to this on several occasions. Could you give us a little bit of a definition for
So
what emotional?
before you go, I feel like I just minimized self-care. It's really important. So I think, to your point, sleep is really good, but I think finding something that you love to do that takes away your maybe obsessive thinking, or you sense yourself being more present, whether it's a hobby, whether it's walking, whether it's exercise, anything like that. I think those are very appropriate self-care things. So I didn't mean to minimize that and say, yeah, you self-care, hey, who cares? It really is a big deal. So
Is that the title of your next book? Self care? Who cares?
yeah, I'm thinking that's got a nice ring to it, if you know what I mean.
Jim, you gave me actually a real nice bridge to the next question I had for you, and that is, we've talked on several occasions about emotional mindfulness.
Mhm.
Uh, it's kind of trended in the last 15 years.
Absolutely true.
But could you give us just a definition of what you mean by that when you talk about emotional mindfulness and how we can be better at it?
Oh, without becoming too obsessive about it, emotional mindfulness is basically, from my perspective, staying in the moment. My casual phrase for that I may have used in other episodes is live in the moment, but make the moment worth living in. And so to really, really be aware that all I have is this moment in my life, how I interact with the clerk at the grocery store, how I interact with people on the highway, all that stuff. Mindfulness tries to help me be more present in the moment, and how you're being affected by others and how you're affecting others.
That's
So,
excellent. And I don't think I've heard that phrase before, so I'm glad you brought it up. I need to listen to the previous episodes apparently to see,
well,
actually listen to what you say.
well, I just wanted to cover my bases because I did say it before. So I don't know that I've ever said that before, but it feels like something I've said quite a bit. So
I
uh,
like it.
I mean, we get so weird in the sense that we want so oftentimes want other people to make my moment worth living in, and they do. They add to it. Good people in your life makes life more enjoyable. But you're with yourself all the time. So how can I make my moment? It's like yesterday. I'm building a small shed here on my property, and I was installing some windows, and I thought the window was too small to go in the opening, so I redid the opening, and then I told you I was only gonna tell you, and now I'm telling the listeners that, "Oh, yeah, I had the window I was putting it in wrong." So, as I was fixing it, I was smiling to myself thinking, "Oh, yeah, that's what you do. You just sometimes you don't follow all the way through with something. If you just turn it around a different way, it might fit." And I think that's pretty apropos of life. If I just look at it differently, chances are it might fit better. So at one of my moments of a lapse in like, should I turn that around? Maybe. Anyway. So
It's a great metaphor.
yeah.
Great, great metaphor. Again, another great bridge. One of the last questions I have here for you is, because we started off talking about ego, when a person has a series of failures that seem to come in a row, and those failures start to erode that internal sense of worth? What do you do?
I challenge the whole judgment of failure.
I like it. Explain.
In other words, the world would say it's failure. It feels like failure because I've defined success a certain way. And so because I define success a certain way, then if I don't achieve that, then it's a failure. When really it's just an attempt and it didn't go, and I've had a series of those. So is there something going on with my approach that I need to adjust? Is my ego too tied up in success so that I keep failing as opposed to looking at it? That's why in my practice, I always look at it as an experiment. You're going to try something. It may have the effect you want, it may not have the effect you want, but let's just experiment with it. And I think that's where we get caught up in kind of dualistic thinking, success, failure, good, bad, right, wrong. And I think failure has such a negative connotation to it. Oh, I failed. Well, okay. You only failed if you really didn't give it a great attempt. Um, and like failure in my mind would be the classic thing, which is I didn't even attempt to do anything. And even is that failure? I don't know. I don't know. Just how would you define failure?
That is a great question, and I love how you've responded to what I posed to you. I have this predisposition, I guess, that in most all situations, we are doing the best we know to do given the information and resources we have in that moment.
Absolutely.
And when something fails, like you just said, we step into this spot of being able to look back on hindsight and say, well, maybe there was another choice that would have worked differently. And we start judging it. But we have to judge it based on where we were in that moment with
Hmm.
the information and knowledge we had. And sometimes I do nothing because that felt like it was the right thing to do based on the information and knowledge I had.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I love what you're saying. Challenge the whole notion of failure. We've talked about this statement before, but it's in moments like this that I love the question, what's the best next step?
Mhm.
If I can get my mind off of, okay, that didn't go as planned. That didn't go the way
And
I wanted it.
that's a better way of saying it than the right next step. There's just the best next step given my moment, and that's why living in the moment so important too. Is like given in this moment, what's the next best step? It could be to take a break.
Mhm.
Be to sit
Yeah.
down and say, okay, wait a minute, I need to contemplate a few things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the best
Or
next
it usually is to run to a home improvement store and buy a tool. So
or, or just walk the aisles and think
or
of all
just
the tools you'd like
a-
to buy.
absolutely true. Absolutely true.
I actually think that the next best step is to bring this to a close. We've covered a lot of ground. This has been so fun for me to pick
Did
your brain on some of these things. And I hope it's been beneficial to the listeners as well. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Jim, great as always to be with
always,
you.
always to be with you. Good. It always good to be with you, D. Yes, no question mark. It is.
Thanks, Jim. See you later.
Yeah. All right, buddy.
That's it for this episode of Therapy, Coaching, and Dreams. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to follow, rate, or share it with someone who might appreciate it as well. Thanks for being here. And until next time, keep growing, stay curious, and take good care of yourself.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff.